Hello all of you wonderful people, Jules here for WhatCulture.com in glorious live action, which means one thing, that we bloody made it, friends. Last week I began a new format where every Tuesday I come to you in both voice and visual and present a list that you have picked that we call Choose Your Own Adventure, and yes, it is still as clever as it was last week. And also, thank you to Accent for last week's video idea, which means that we're covering this, video game deaths that you were powerless to stop. Now this idea, it spoke volumes to me because video games love to make a huge deal out of player agency, and yet there are times where things are just completely out of your control. And more often than not, that means that we're going to be saying goodbye to our favourites as they're going to be eating some wet bread and heading up to the toaster in the sky. R.I.P. friends. So today, let's take a look at some of the best. And remember to let me know what list you'd like to see on this channel, and if we like the idea, we'll write it, edit it, and this beautiful boy will present it next Tuesday. Plus, I'll be in the live chat over here or here, I don't know where it's going to be, and also I'll be in the comments for the next few hours, so hit me up with any Q&A stuff as well. So without further ado, let's get on with the list. Number 10, Edith Gainsborough. Final Fantasy VII. Is there any video game death more thoroughly heartbreaking than that of sweet, innocent Edith, or Eris depending on your preference, who is taken away from us midway through Square Enix's landmark RPG Final Fantasy VII? The answer is a resounding no. Totally out of nowhere, this kind-hearted companion is impaled by Sephiroth Masamune's sword, and within a matter of seconds, she's gone. There isn't a sentimental farewell, just a thoroughly enraged Cloud cradling Aerith's corpse while Sephiroth taunts him. This is one of the most emotional moments in gaming, and for damn good reason, because she was a character beloved by many and undeserving of such a brutal and sudden death. In fact, so deep was the rage that it instilled in players that there were rumors for years circulating that there were secret ways of bringing her back to life. At present, the only way of doing that is with mods or cheats. Though it will be interesting to see whether or not the impending Final Fantasy VII remake offers players the chance to resurrect her, or, as the current model probably stands, buy a way of doing it. Curse you, Square Enix, you know I will pay for that as well! Number 9, Eli Vance, Half-Life 2 Episode 2. Half-Life 2 Episode 2, aka the game that has been teasing boners for years, concludes with Alex and Gordon preparing to visit Aperture Science's research vessel known as the Borealis. And as compelling a cliffhanger as that would have been in of itself, Valve decided to dish up one final jolting surprise for the fans. In the game's closing moments, the hangar is discovered by two advisors, one of which quickly grabs Alex's father Eli and impales him through the back of the head right in front of her eyes. Alex is scarcely saved from the same fate by Dog, and the episode ends with Alex cradling her father's corpse, and it is one hell of a bummer. Though the player being unable to do anything to help Eli is bad enough, it is even worse when you consider that this game was released over 12 years ago, and Valve still hasn't shown any sign of giving fans some sort of narrative follow-up whatsoever, clearly being way too busy keeping all of those crap games off of Steam. And what a good job they're doing there! Number 8, Lee Everett. The Walking Dead. Though Telltale's The Walking Dead games present players with a certain degree of freedom, it was a real Sophie's Choice situation in the first season's final episode when infected protagonist Lee is given two options. Ask his surrogate daughter Clementine to kill him before turning into a walker, or have her flee the area and leave him to turn. Players are basically tasked with the same situation as when being asked to eat a pile of sick, or being trapped in a lift with Scott Tailford after accidentally mentioning, "Oh, can you explain the entire plot of the Metal Gear series?" Basically, you are left with a matter of picking one terrible option and a slightly less terrible option. Either way, the end result is basically the same. Lee, the person that the player grew to know and care for over the course of this game, is no more, and there is no way of players being able to save him. And it absolutely sucks. It was an important and definitely necessary death to move Clementine's arc along, but oh God, did this hurt. Season 2, of course, shifts the player perspective to Clem herself, but in all of the game's subsequent seasons, never once did it achieve quite the same level of expertly crafted hopelessness as this. Number 7, John Marston, Red Dead Redemption. Rockstar Games' Red Dead Redemption boasts arguably the strongest climax to any of their games to date, as protagonist John Marston's past finally catches up with him, and he gets, well, not to be too indelicate about it, lit up like a Christmas tree and peppered with more holes than a wheel of Swiss cheese. But what is truly brilliant about Marston's death is that the player is given some sort of brief opportunity to use the game's slow-mo Deadeye mechanic to take down as many of Edgar Ross's men as possible before John is literally blown to hell, implying that there is a certain measure of player agency in how his fate actually plays out. And yet, it is impossible to take down the horde of government agents, but it teases the player with a chance of success before absolutely crushing them. It is a horrible moment, but one that is so expertly crafted through the use of this glimmer of hope that players, and indeed channels like us, well, we never really stop talking about it. But as a kind of compromise, players are then able to take control of John's son Jack for the game's epilogue sequence, where you can mete out bloody vengeance against Ross in a mano-a-mano duel. And boy, does that feel good. Number 6, you, Sarah Lyons, or everyone. Fallout 3. The original ending of Fallout 3 was such a misguided exercise in ripping away player choice that Bethesda actually eventually had to come back and fix the ending of the game with the Broken Steel DLC. However, the pre-update version of the game ended with the player being forced to decide who will enter this irradiated control room and input a code, saving the day, but subjecting themselves to a lethal dose of radiation in the process. Now, despite being surrounded by cohorts, all of your pals give hilariously flimsy excuses for not volunteering themselves, all of which are basically variations on the not wanting to change your destiny. Destiny? I'm sorry, folks, but you literally eat radiation for breakfast, so why don't you take your irradiated super scrotum in there and do your boy a chuffing favour? So what choices that you are left with? You either dabble with the deadly dose yourself or send in Sarah Lyons, or do precisely nothing, which is not advised in the slightest, as the facility will explode and everyone will die, but you know, you do you. It was much like how I've just realised I'm wearing a green logo t-shirt against a green screen, which is probably going to cause issues with you. A lamely transparent attempt to funnel the player down a set story path, and fans just outright rejected it, warning others not to complete the story and instead enjoy the game free of being taken around the back and shot like an irradiated old yeller. Thankfully, in the patch though, Fawkes and the other radiation-immune companions could be locked in the boom tube and save the day without consequence. Number 5, the boss, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. The final boss in Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater is, of course, Naked Snake's steely mentor, the boss, a former American agent who defected to the USSR. What follows is a glorious final battle that sees the reluctant Snake battling the boss in a field, and once that she's been mortally wounded, Hideo Kojima literally stops the game and forces the player to put the final bullet in her. There is no other option here. Well, I mean, you could turn off your console if you wanted to actually avoid doing it, if you really wanted to, but otherwise, there is no choice but to shoot her dead in the head. Sad. The unease that comes with plugging such a nuanced character becomes worse in retrospect though, because it's then revealed moments later that the boss never actually defected, but simply feigned defection in order to infiltrate Volgin's ranks and try and take down the philosopher's legacy. This information would have been very useful if delivered a minute or two earlier, right? And if you don't feel terrible enough as is, the boss has to die a traitor, branded by all but yourself, Eva, and a handful of others who actually know the truth as somebody who is a dirty, dirty defector. And yet, it's the smartest and most emotionally resonant writing of Kojima's entire career, and as devastating as it is, we wouldn't have it any other way. Number 4, Edith Finch. What remains of Edith Finch? Giant Sparrow's unforgettable walking simulator, What Remains of Edith Finch, is a game entirely obsessed with death, with the whole game focused on the titular protagonist exploring the home of her cursed family, who have all died in a litany of mysterious and often darkly amusing ways. But at the end of the game, it's revealed that Edith is pregnant and consequently she dies in childbirth, which, as you might expect, is emotionally devastating to the player. But further still, the player's character is then revealed to not actually be Edith herself, but her son Christopher, the only surviving Finch, who places some flour on young Edith's grave just before the credits roll. Knowing that your entire extended family are dead before the game even begins is one thing, but learning that the person you thought you were playing for the entire game died years prior and that you're technically the cause is the sort of existential crisis that nobody needs in their life. But despite how emotionally traumatic it is, it also provides us a poignant and uncommonly insightful perspective on the impermanence of everything. And that's a rarity in video games. Number 3, Sarah, The Last of Us. Naughty Dog's The Last of Us makes the player feel the weight of every character death like few games in history, and none more so than the opening demise of Joel's young daughter, Sarah. What is truly brilliant about this game's chaotic prologue is how efficiently it makes the player empathize with Joel and informs his mission throughout the rest of the game. In that opening 15 minutes, the player desperately scrambles to get Sarah to safety, but fails when she's accidentally shot by a soldier. Now, a more traditional game would have had it happen off-screen or relegated it entirely to a non-interactive cutscene, but by making the player live through the horror and to come so close, their own protective instinct for Ellie is immediately activated from the start of the game proper. It is a clever, if horrible, narrative device if there ever was one. Number 2, Fergus or Wyatt, Wolfenstein: The New Order. Wolfenstein: The New Order's pre-titles prologue concludes in an unforgettably grim fashion when protagonist BJ Blazkowicz is captured alongside his pals Fergus and Wyatt while breaking into Death's Head's weapons laboratory. Now, the sadistic Death Head then forces BJ to choose whether he kills Fergus or Wyatt, resulting in a stomach-churningly gruesome cutscene where the victim of the player's choosing has their eyeballs ripped out before having a barbaric surgical instrument cut a hole in the back of their head and suck their brains out while they're still alive. Mondays, am I right? In either case, there's nothing the player can do about this. It's like a horrific game show where no one wins and yet you have to make a choice at some point. Worse still, you then have to destroy said brain at the end of the game because Death Head has placed it inside of a robot which then attacks you, meaning that you've got to kill your mate twice. Jeez. As much as graphic violence shouldn't surprise any Wolfenstein fan, the sheer pleasure that Death Head took in offing one of your friends made it especially nauseating, and all the more satisfying when you finally get your revenge. And number 1, Vas, Far Cry 3. And so we close on a slightly different angle for our final entry. After all, you're probably wondering why we're crying foul at the death of Far Cry 3's cartoonishly savage antagonist Vas, right? Well, the manner in which he died proved hugely frustrating to fans because Vas isn't killed by the player's own inputs, but during a cutscene after they enact a basic takedown prompt. It's a QTE effectively. Given how hatefully Vas was depicted throughout the game, for players to not even have the satisfaction of ending him themselves was mightily unsatisfying. We wanted to be the ones who finished him off, but instead, the game took control away from us and did it itself. Boo. Boo. And there we go, 10 video game deaths that you were powerless to stop. I really hope that you enjoyed this, and thank you so much, Skenth, for submitting this last week. And remember that you can submit your own ideas down below, and I'll pick one and present it next week on Choose Your Own Adventure. Still good, that one. Anyway, before I go, I just want to say one thing. We spoke a lot today about deaths that were outside of our control, and I am aware that death itself in real life is often that, something unpredictable and equally devastating. Yet it's okay, It is a natural part of life to lose the ones that we love, but don't take their absence as something that stops you from being complete. Take their memory and live for those people who helped us, loved us, brought us up, taught us, because that's the most important thing that you can do, to live your life, not spend it regretting or wishing for it to be different. So go out there and absolutely smash it, you big ledge. Big love from me to you. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me at RetroJ with a 0. Like I said before, pop all the comments and your list suggestions down in the comment section below. I'd love to read them all. Hope that you are well and treating yourself fairly as you possibly can. And remember, you have been awesome. Never forget that. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.